We're going to come to you to this evening from the book of Nehemiah, Nehemiah chapter 3. I've literally laughed at myself trying to read all these names. I'll just give you the opportunity. Just read through Nehemiah chapter 3 and there's 50 names in there. And this is the record of the builders, the people who actually did the work. And I'm probably not going to try to read every name, okay? But we want to give you a few pointers from this passage, okay? A few points from this passage. And so in verses 1 and 2, it says, Then Elisha the high priest rose up with his brethren, the priest, and built the sheep gate. And they consecrated it and hung its doors. They built as far as the Tower of the 100 and consecrated it, then as far as the Tower of Hananel. Next to Elisha, the men of Jericho built, and next to them, Zachar, the son of Imri, built. And so this is all about the building. We've seen how Nehemiah prayed. He had a burden the Lord had placed on his heart for him to be a part of the restoration of the gates and the walls of Jerusalem. And then the king allowed him to go and do the work. He provided the resources, provided the papers necessary to pass through that area. And so we saw that last week in chapter 2, we saw how he had rallied the troops, gathered them, and shared his vision and the need, and they committed to the work. Well, this is them doing the work. And the first person, as mentioned, is Elisha. And so Elisha was the first worker mentioned. He rose up to do the work with the other priests, and they worked at rebuilding the sheep gate. Now, the sheep gate is literally known for that because that's where the people brought the sheep into the city. And so that's why it's called the sheep gate. And so, but we see here this high priest, he was leading by example. He rose up and his brethren, the rest of the priests, joined him. And so leadership is important. And when a godly leader takes the lead and goes to the front of the work, he's leading by example, but people are willing to follow. And so some people think it's too spiritual to do the work. But listen, those who are in leadership positions, they need to be all about the work, doing the work of the Lord. And so we see here that Elisha was the first one to do the work. And what they did was they consecrated. They did the work and then they consecrated it. And so consecration, we're familiar with that term, but it's, it is something special. The city gates were made especially for God. This is God's assignment. And so the work that God calls us to, we're to be set apart for it. And so we understand what it means for something to be set apart exclusively for the Lord. So they're not just doing the work of building the walls and the gates. They're doing the work of God. And so when we set aside what God has called us to do is consecrated, we want to make sure we give its fair importance to it. And so we understand that from Colossians 3:17, whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. And so we understand that, that what it means to be set apart. Well, it goes on, next to Elisha, the men of Jericho built. So each man's work was important. And so that's why you have all these names. The biblical record is a list of 50 people who took the lead in rebuilding the wall. Remember where Nehemiah recognized in chapter 2 that he couldn't do it by himself. He went out and inspected the walls. He couldn't do it by himself. It's going to take people committed to the work. They made the commitment to the work. And here we have 50 names of people committed to the work. And then we go on into verses 3-5. Also the sons of Hassenaah, whatever it is, built the fish gate. I'm familiar with it. Randy Hamilton always said when he got into all his names, like, I just say wheelbarrow and roll on, okay? But anyway, so they do work at the fish gate. They laid its beams and hung its doors and bolts and bars. And next to them was Miramoth, the son of Arijah, the son of Koz, made repairs. Next to them, Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, the son of Meshezabel, made repairs. Next to them, Zadok, the son of Baana, made repairs. Next to them, the Tekoites made repairs. But listen to this at the end of verse 5. But their nobles did not put their shoulders to the work of the Lord. Yikes is what I put there. The fish gate. And that's where the nearby fish market was. That's the simple name for it. And the sons of Hassenaah did the work of rebuilding that gate and made repairs as all through this whole chapter. Made repairs, repaired, made repairs. They're doing the work that God has called them to do. And making repairs is the idea of strengthening, encouraging, making something strong. And so we know what it's like to repair something. They are doing whatever is necessary to repair the strength of the gates so they can be of use to keep the city. And to think to repair something is to make it stronger. And so they're broken down gates. They're repairing the gates and re-strengthening the gates. And so it does talk about the Tekoites made repairs. They did their work. The people of the city from Tekoa were more than willing to work. But it says their nobles, they weren't willing to do the work. They did not put their shoulders to the work. And so when you try to rally the troops and you try to lead people and you try to get people committed to the task, I'll just be honest with you. Not everybody's going to do the work. Now, it shouldn't be just a small amount of people doing the work. But the reality is all of us are called to do the work. It's a work set apart for the Lord, so it's special. We're to give our attention to it, and so in our commitment, our time, our efforts to it. But the reality of leadership is knowing that as much as you want everybody to do their part, not everybody's going to do their part, and that's the sad reality of it. But everybody should do their part. But we see here the examples of the Tekoite leaders that wouldn't do their part. They just refused to. So, can y'all hear my dog howling in the background? That's Hank howling. The train's coming through. I'm sorry. That's Hank, if you can hear him, okay? So, anyway, every time the train comes through, he howls like that. Sort of eerie, especially if he were to do it at night. Okay, the builders of the gate, 6 through 12. Moreover, Jehoiada, the son of Peasiah, and Meshullam, the son of Besodeiah, repaired the old gate. They laid its beams, hung its doors. And then we go through all these names of different people that were instrumental, but they weren't builders. That's the thing about it. We see the first people committed to the task were the leaders. The priestly leaders. Now in this passage, we see goldsmiths making repairs. We see perfumers making repairs. And so that's the thing about it. When God calls us to build something, He wants us to commit to it. It doesn't mean that it's going to be everyone's strengths. It just means that we're called to do the work. And so people in various backgrounds and specialties, they all put their shoulders to the work, except for the nobles from Tekoa. And so, and it says there in the verse 12 that, and next to him was Shalom, the son of Halohesh, leader of the half district of Jerusalem. He and his daughters made repairs. And so, listen, it's a family. You see, these are groups of individuals and their families. They committed to the task. And so much of what we do in a church sometimes is done separately, as if there's adults are supposed to do the work and young people are supposed to do certain work, and the children, they're just there for the play. No, this is showing that it's families committed to the task, not just certain individuals. And so they're men from different professions, not professional builders, but as men and their families, they help to rebuild the gate. And so the most important ability in the work of the Lord is your availability. And so we want you to know that. And so it is important that everyone, and I think sometimes it's shame that we don't include the younger people a lot of times in the work and allow them to do more. And so I believe that's part of it. Well, it goes on into builders near the valley gate, repaired 1,000 cubits of the wall as far as the refuse gate. Then the builders near the refuse gate, the leader of the district of Beth Hakkasarim repaired the refuse gate. He built it and hung its doors with its bolts and bars. It just continues on and on and on. It's like 25 times in here made repairs or repaired. And so you actually have passages there where the Tekoites repaired another section. The reality of the work of the church is that some people will do more than their share of the work. The Tekoites weren't satisfied with the work that they did earlier. They came back and did some more of the work. And so you may have a few that maybe disappoint or discourage you by their unwillingness to do the work, but the reality is that there will be some that more than make up for their lack of effort. And the reality of pastoring and leading especially is that I have to be careful with those people who will do the work. Some people won't tell a pastor no, and some people just, and so I have to make sure I don't go back to that well too many times to keep asking. But we're thankful, and it's meant, the work of the church is meant for all of us to do, and everybody has been given a gift to be used by the Lord. And so everybody needs to use their gift for the Lord. And God's called us to do a good work, a great work, work that's sanctified and consecrated and set apart for Him. And so you just read this chapter and just laugh at yourself for all the names that we don't always pronounce correctly. Forgive me. I'm very educated and very capable of mispronouncing those names. And so, but a few observations from Nehemiah. One is it pleased God to see His people working together in one accord with one heart and one mind. What a blessing it is when we all work together. The work was done by families. And so I've already mentioned that. Everyone mentioned as a son of someone in this. And so it's important that our families are important. And families coming together to work together for the Lord's glory, it's important. And we see in this chapter that Nehemiah was an effective leader. But the Lord had to stir their hearts. Okay? So they were committed to the task, and here we see people putting their shoulder to the work, except for the nobles from the Tekoites. And so I just want to thank you for each person in our church that works as consecrated people, doing the work of the Lord. And we love you. We appreciate you. We love Blue Mountain Baptist Church. And thank you for this opportunity. I know this is a little bit longer. I didn't expect a break to hear my dog howl at the train going by. God bless y'all.